What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman. Me, Austin, Football with Oz are back for Against the Blitz, episode 13. And in T-minus, 17 days, we have the start of the tampering period, which strikes the clock for free agency. So we're deciding to dig into it a bit early. We'll do a bigger deep dive later on, closer to the date. But today we're going to be looking at some of the most intriguing, interesting free agents that aren't getting all of the attention in the headlines. It's not your average, T. Higgins talk. We're going to get into some very polarizing players, and I'm excited to see who Austin has to bring to the table because there are a lot of names that a lot of people aren't really talking about that deserve some sort of conversation.
Yeah, a lot of the guys I picked, they're high variance players. So there's some that I think the world of that aren't really being treated like they have a market, and some people that are being talked about nonstop that I don't really feel like they should have much of a market. So I'm excited to kind of say these names to you. He has no idea any of these players. I've been trying to keep him a full secret, so we're going into this blind. It'll be interesting.
That's an understatement. I am looking forward to that. I got some names too, because like I told you prior, I got some names too. I'm going to get your thoughts on if we don't cover them. So I'm excited.
Awesome. We'll do. And these are also he had no way to prepare for this really. So this is all just going to be initial thoughts on all of these players. But let's go with you. We can just go ahead and get started on them.
Hell yeah.
All right, so for quarterback's a little bit harder to get into because everyone talks about quarterbacks all the time. But the one that I think has the most high variance, the broadest range of outcomes, is Justin Fields for this upcoming season. So I'm curious to see, one, what team-ish do you think that he could be going to, and what kind of market should he be pulling?
The thing about Justin Fields is we know the story on this guy now. We know what he is, we know what he's about, his limitations. We have the entire book on Justin Fields, and it actually has made me appreciate him more, and I think what he could bring to a team, whereas people have been trying to shove him into starting positions and trying to suggest he can actually play at that level consistently. And that's where I was you can shut the door on those conversations, but now I can appreciate what he can bring in a different sense. And I think it opens the options. Last week we talked about the Browns, rebuilding the Browns, and I suggested, why don't the Browns bring in Fields with a veteran backup and kind of do what the Steelers did? I think Fields is the most ideal player for a rebuilding team out there. I think in terms of bridge quarterbacks, I think that's probably as good as you can get because he probably won't have you losing every single game. It looks like you went out and tried to get someone. Plus, who knows? On the off chance he somehow clicks and the talent, comes together and combusts into this franchise quarterback, which it won't. But on the off chance it does, I think Justin Fields, there's some upside there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you have some of the craziest athletic tools that we've ever seen from a quarterback, it's always going to be hard to say that the door is closed. Until we see his athleticism decline, I'm never going to be able to comfortably say that his development is done. He has no chance. I am a little bit lower on him though, that a lot of the consensus still seems to be as a pocket passer, but I mean, he's 25, 26 probably. He still has tons of room to grow there. So I think a team that does a good job of developing quarterbacks, it could actually be worth a decent investment. A team like the Browns though, we might just see the exact same Justin Fields that we've been seeing for the last, since 2022, 2021, since he was drafted. So he's a guy that I feel has super high variance. He could have the lowest of lows and could actually have pretty high highs if he can be developed how I hope he can be.
So you'd stick him to the Kevin O'Connells or the Sean McVays. And
I would like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that do? Let's entertain that idea for a second. Hypothetically speaking, right, we see guys like Sam Darnold thrown into those systems, or hypothetically could be with all the Matthew Stafford trade rumors circulating. But nonetheless, what does a Justin Fields look like in that kind of offense?
I think pretty good. I mean, we've seen him in these one read systems, let it loose in college. It's not like he just doesn't have an arm, and it's not like he can't operate in downfield passing attacks. He was one of the best at that in college. His entire tape was just him untethering these 65-yard bombs to Olave in his chest. He has that in his toolbox somewhere. But it's been the whole reading the defense and like diagnosing and reacting part that he's really struggled with. And same with Darnold, honestly. Like living in this system where he could just kind of have a predetermined read, a really comfortable downfield passing attack for him. Like, I'd like to see Justin Fields in a situation like that, and finally like have a competent OC that I can say develops quarterbacks well.
Hypothetically speaking, if let's say there were two versions of the Vikings this year, one version that had Sam Darnold and they had the season that they had, and now we're looking at Sam Darnold just the top quarterback in the free agent market, and then but also Justin Fields kind of replicated it, except he was the quarterback instead of Sam Darnold. I think you would rather have the Justin Fields, because we saw Sam Darnold when under pressure, like the guy collapsed, the guy shattered. Mm-hmm. He fell short of the moment. Not to say I believe Justin Fields wouldn't, but you at least have some faith that he's escaping some of the situations that Sam Darnold didn't and getting away from some of the pressure. Or maybe there are play calls in the bag for Kevin O'Connell to kind of mitigate the pressure that Darnold was under against the Lions, for example. So it's an interesting case study, that guy is, and he always will be till he's out of this league.
Yeah, I mean, until he's like what I was saying before, until like he's old enough where we can say that the door is closed, I'm always going to believe a little bit in somebody that has such ridiculous tools, unless they're Trey Lance. I'm done on that. But with Justin Fields, I still can, like, he won a lot of games this season as the starting quarterback, so it's not impossible. I'm just kind of curious what kind of team could do that. I don't think that there's going to be much of a market for him, honestly, but it'd be cool to see if he can go to somewhere that, like the Rams, if they decide to move on from Stafford, like if somebody throws a dart at him, like, I think to see what could happen.
Someone will. He will undoubtedly be on a team, and I think he will be undoubtedly seeing starting snaps for one reason or another this year. I'm not saying he'll win the job, but he will be in a situation where, okay, if we have to turn to Fields here, we're not mad about it. And I think that's where he ends up, wherever that is.
Yeah. That's actually kind of similar to what happened to the running back that I wanted to bring up. He's a kind of a guy that was a no-name for a while and then finally got really good action this season and played really, really well. His name is Jordan Mason from the San Francisco 49ers. He was a guy that was a fantasy darling for many that lost CMC, and he played really, really, really good football for probably half of his attempts. So I'm kind of curious to see if you think that he is an NFL starter or if he's a high-end RB2 like he was this last season.
Ooh, that's a good one. I thought for sure you were going Rico Dowdle there. I
love Rico Dowdle. I talk too much about him to talk.
Yeah. I thought I was about to cut you off and go Rico, but
nah.
Yeah. I mean, I in my list of players that I might suggest after the fact, Rico was on there, and I mentioned Jordan Mason to a brief extent too. You know, these are guys, you know, Rico, silent 1,000-yard rusher, an impactful passing game, impactful in the passing game as well, to some surprise. And Jordan Mason obviously stepping in for the 49ers and being everything that they could have hoped to be, you know, in the absence of Christian McCaffrey. I mean, no one was going to bring that upside as a receiver, so they couldn't expect that from anybody.
No.
But in terms of being a pure runner, in terms of running between the tackles and, you know, picking up those chunks for 10, 15 plus, he did it, you know, just as well. So he's a guy that is really the pain in the backside for all of the top running backs. Like, why am I going to go and pay James fucking Cook $15 million annually when Jordan Mason's out there? Like, genuinely, like, as a Bills fan, that's how I think about it. As a football fan, that's how I think about it. These are the kinds of guys that exist: the Tyler Algiers, the Rico Dowdles, the Jordan Masons. Like, these are the reasons why these top running backs don't get the paychecks they do. So, or at least people hesitate to pay them the paychecks that they get. And I Jordan Mason for sure would be on my radar for potential starting running backs, or at least heavy in a rotation somewhere. Like, I think, not that they might need him. Like the Chargers, for example. I think Jordan Mason on the Chargers would be a great fit. I know J.K. Dobbins is a free agent. I think he would plug in there very well. So I like Jordan Mason a lot.
Yeah, and I was just kind of thinking, even for teams like the Raiders last season, who had no run game, like it did not exist. Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah. We don't say the other guy's name, Mr. White, but
Mr. White.
Like, there's teams that clearly needed a running back, which is kind of crazy for like almost how attainable a good running back is to get to your team. So guys like him, I feel like they're pretty cheap payday still, even after having like a good performance season. So I don't think he'll be expensive at all, just for how stacked this rookie running back class is. But I definitely could see him kind of, if a team like the Raiders decides to use all their capital on, other, trenches and receivers, I could definitely see them picking up a guy like a Jordan Mason to try and compete for that starting role.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The Raiders, I mean, we can look at teams scrolling through the list. I mean, who knows what James Conner's going to be like this year? What I mean, how old is he now? 31 at least.
Something like that. He's old.
He's old.
He's the same class like Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, all them. So
yeah, like
the same way.
They have Trey Benson back there, but they'll need a second guy to rotate in eventually. A team like the Saints. I mean, Alvin Kamara too. Like that running back room is down bad, especially when Kamara really hits the wall. So Jordan Mason definitely is a guy that will find work somewhere, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. My next guy that I wanted to talk about, after you talked about the Bills, I feel like this is a guy you're pretty familiar with. He's a guy that is going to start next year somewhere, but there are teams that are needy of a wide receiver one, and I'm curious how needy. Someone like Stefon Diggs is somebody that is just removed being one of the best receivers in the NFL not that long ago, and has kind of fallen off since and not really talked about as a free agent this season. So I'm curious if someone like the Packers that needs a wide receiver one, someone like the Patriots that needs a wide receiver one, if there is some kind of decent payday for Diggs, or if he will just take a vet minimum somewhere where he can win.
Yeah, I mean, I know my Bills bias leaks into this one. I try to keep it out as much as possible, but to me, I'm out on Diggs. If this was a strictly overrated, underrated segment, I'm over. He's on the overrated side as far as I can fucking shove him over there. He's in there. Like I'm so out on the guy. I think he was playing very good football with Houston for that short bit, that quarter of the season he played. I do think it takes a very specific offense for him to fit. Like I think if he would have went to the Chargers and tried to do what Ladd McConkey did, I don't think it would have went very well at all. So it definitely matters where he ends up. Now he's coming off a knee injury. The guy's already got, character concerns to some extent too. So
a lot of extent.
A lot. So I'm way out on Diggs. I think a team would be insane to be like, shoveling him a contract of any sort of decent value at this stage coming off of this injury. Like he already was falling off per perception of everyone else. And now I'm out. Get me out.
There's some people, I mean, you have to have three receivers, and there's some teams that are unable to find one. I don't know what's wrong with some of these teams. Like the New England Patriots have been unable to find a competent receiver for the last like half decade. It's ridiculous. So I feel like somebody will, whether it's a good idea or not, pay a guy that's been proven to be a good receiver at some point and just hope that he's still that. I'm with you though. I don't think that he's touching that 1,000-yard receiver season ever again. He's got to be in his 30s too, right? If not really, really close. Like he's probably like 32, I would guess. Like
he's 32, yeah.
Okay, so yeah. I mean, paying a 32-year-old receiver with character concerns and coming off of a pretty significant injury, I don't think I would, but there's definitely going to be some kind of market for him, which is going to be kind of crazy.
The thing about Diggs to me is he's a guy, and this is how I felt about Keenan Allen to some capacity, and I ended up being wrong for the Bears. Like I thought Keenan Allen was going to go in there, and I mean, actually, I'll take that back. I don't know how wrong I really was, because I was worried that Keenan Allen was going to step in, and everyone was saying he's going to be great for Caleb Williams in his rookie year, and he'll be the go-to guy underneath the safety blanket bullshit. Like I understand that, but then you plug him into an offense with a rookie quarterback and an offensive coordinator that has him running the primary crossing routes, and the guy can't separate for his life. At his age, and that's what was happening a lot of the time. It's like, why is Romo Dunze not the one running horizontally across the field? Why is Keenan Allen the guy that's doing this? And it took away opportunities for other players on the team that probably should have been giving that shot, like a Romo Dunze. So, and I think a Stefon Diggs, you plug him into an offense where whether he's being, relied on to be that top target or just another guy in the offense, it's like you might be just trying to force something that isn't there anymore instead of letting someone else get the limelight and potentially finding out what you have, in another guy on your team, because you're like, oh, we have to pay this guy for the sake of getting a receiver, when it turns out that, you're just putting him out there because you paid him, when you have someone that you're giving $200,000 to, that can probably do it just as well and maybe have more of an upside. So I don't know. I'm iffy.
I feel similarly to how I did about Keenan Allen last season, where there is probably going to be a few games where he goes for 150 and 2 touchdowns, and everybody says like, oh, he's back. But then there are the games where he is just completely stifled in man coverage, and he can't, like, the corner lives on his hip and he can't get open. And I feel like it'll almost be the exact same thing with Diggs. He'll have his games where he reminds you who he is, and that he is still probably one of the better route runners in the NFL when he's healthy and gets to get let loose. But the athletic juice probably just isn't there to be who he once was. And with his character concerns, I think it'll be a weird fit on any team.
Yeah. The injury
for
too.
Sure.
No, Keenan Allen wasn't coming off of that type of knee injury too. So.
No, he was just always that slow.
Yeah.
So I mean, Diggs actually at least used to being somewhat athletic. So
yeah,
if he did, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to speak to his injury, but yeah, I'm a little worried about it.
Absolutely.
For sure. Keenan Allen was one of the guys also that I was thinking about touching on, because he's another free agent this season that his value is probably a lot lower than it has ever been. So, but we kind of got that one answered already.
Yeah.
I think I have an idea of how you feel about him.
I'm out on Keenan Allen. 30, he's 33. Yeah. Like when is his birthday? Keenan Allen is probably gonna be Keenan age. Keenan Ivory. Wait, what?
What? He's getting AARP soon.
Yeah, seriously.
That geezer, my God. He's looked 50 for 5 years.
He is gonna be 34 by the time his birthday's in April. So.
Yeah. No thanks. Yeah, no thanks. Then I'll probably bring it back to the younger side then. I'm gonna bring it to a guy. I skip tight ends. There's nothing interesting there. We're going to the offensive line. We're going to a guy that has possibly beaten the bust allegations. A guy that entered Stoutland University this season and went from being one of the worst offensive line busts of the last decade to being a really good starting right guard, Mekhi Becton. Do you think that he's worth the money as a elite run blocking guard for the Eagles, or do you still think that he's Mekhi Becton that we know and love?
I don't think he's still Mekhi Becton. I think attending Stoutland University is good for anybody. I think it comes with its perks and it comes with its negatives. It's like, of course, he definitely improved. He's not what he was with the Jets. He probably found some confidence, which was half the battle over in New York, which is huge for him. But it also comes with the cons for a team that's looking to add a guard that they can rely on a down-to-down basis, because you don't know how to value him, because you have two different versions of Mekhi. So I do think he is a top 5 guard. I'd probably say 5 out of in the free agency class right now. Like, I think him, like a James Daniels, like, I don't know, kind of a toss up to me. But I don't know. Mekhi Becton, I would have to say it depends on where he goes. It depends where he goes, because I know you said you mentioned that before he went to Philadelphia, you would like to have him in Cincinnati. Like, in my mind, hypothetically, if he ends up in Cincinnati, like, I feel like the trajectory of his career probably is either flatlining or just slightly increasing. Like, who knows what he turns into going there instead.
Yeah. I mean, it would not be the offensive guard that we just saw this last season. And like, one thing that we haven't seen a ton of yet is someone go to the Eagles and then leave. Like, we keep seeing them develop these monsters that just are Eagles forever. Like, we haven't really seen like Lane Johnson or Mailata or Landon Dickerson or Kelsey. Like, we haven't seen any of these guys really go anywhere else. So I'm curious to know if it's just like the active system that they run that helps them, or if it's just like the development in the offseason, and then you can send them else and they're going to be good elsewhere. So like, I'm kind of scared it won't be the same player.
Isaac
elsewhere.
Samalu went to Pittsburgh, right? He was a Philly guard.
I think he played there for a little bit, and then like he got injured in Pittsburgh for a while. Like I haven't really heard much about him, honestly, since he's
Yeah,
been
I
there.
haven't either. That's why I was going to ask. Like, did he play well this year? Like, I knew he went to Pittsburgh. I wasn't sure if it was this past offseason, or the one before that. Was he
I think it
drafted
was.
in Philadelphia? Because that's the
I
difference too. Like Becton, obviously coming from New
believe.
York. Let's see.
Could be wrong.
He played, I think, 12 games this year. 13 games he played. So
Okay.
he missed some time.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't awful. It was all right. But yeah, I mean, nonetheless, we've seen not many guys leave Philadelphia because they keep their guys in house because they like him. So
yeah, especially the ones that they like commit to fully developing. Like Siamala was a guy that like he was okay there, but like he wasn't ever a guy that anybody was like, oh my god, look what Stoutland just did. Like he just turned this guy from a bum to a monster. Like he was kind of just like a solid guard forever, and I guess he still is a solid guard now. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like if he leaves the Stoutland system, does he become a worse guard, or like do we think the development's been done? Like, do you think he is just a better guard now after his offseason development? I have no idea.
I might. I think maybe I'm just being mean, but I think Becton certainly. I think, especially depending on where he goes, I think we've seen the ceiling for Mekhi. Let's put it that way. In Philadelphia, I think he's hit his ceiling. If he goes to like a San Francisco, to replace, I know they need a revamp, in a couple places on that line, but maybe, we get a similar version. But if he goes to a team and they're like, holy shit, dude, come and save this fucking unit, he's not doing it. He will probably fall into the trap of, what that team has been struggling with over the last couple of years. Like if he goes to the Bears, I think he could he'll be their starting guard. He'll be a starting guard, or at least competing for the job, but they'll probably still be dealing with a lot of the same issues they were before, where no one's really being the anchor. No one's a guy that they can trust on a consistent basis. And, he might get benched a few games for another guy. Like, I think the ebbs and flows would be volatile. I think that word is very good for Mekhi Becton in a new organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, that's the kind of player I was trying to go for when I was trying to compile this list, because like, I am torn between whether or not he's going to be good or whether or not he's going to be bad. It almost entirely depends on where he lands, which is like the whole point of free agency. But I'm going to stay in Philadelphia for my next guy. I'm going to pick a guy that just earned himself probably a lot more money than we ever thought that he'd be making. A guy like Josh Sweat that dominated the Super Bowl with 7 pressures. And he's kind of always just been like he's been an edge rusher. Yeah. That had his games, had his moments, but it's sounding like the market for him is really picking up. So I'm curious to know if you think that that's warranted. Like, do you view him as a starting edge rusher, a 3-down guy, or do you view him as the Josh Sweat that he's been the last 5 years of his career?
Yeah, I think he is going to make a prettier penny than he probably deserved because of that Super Bowl performance. I think the class of edge rushers in free agency here is certainly going to help his case. I don't strike it to be that strong. There's a 34-year-old Khalil Mack. Awesome. Myles Garrett's on the trade market. Like Matthew Judon's washed his shit too.
Even older, yeah.
Like I think just because of what's out there, he also might fetch a premium or a slightly bigger one. Another guy that I would be weary of bringing in as a team that needs pass rush and saying, save. I think there are guys that you can sign that will save it and revive a unit. There are guys that will be a part of a unit depending on what that unit looks like. And I think Josh Sweat fits that mold more. It's like he'll be good if the unit's good. He'll help out if the unit is solid. But if it's not, he'll have his games here and there. But he's not gonna change the tides of many games individually.
Yeah, and that's almost exactly how I was gonna put it. Where like he's a good rotational guy, like he is a good part of a unit. But I think I worry for one of these teams that like if a team loses a Myles Garrett, or like if they lose a Trey Hendrickson and they try to just replace him with Josh Sweat, that's where I think that we'll see a severe overpay. And we're going to see a guy get like 8.5 sacks and everyone call him a free agency bust. And I don't really want that for him. So going to a unit like Carolina, for example, where like they just need pass rush in some way, shape, or form, and they don't care how they get it. Getting it from a guy like Josh Sweat, who, if he can be smart and understand that he's not elite and take a normal payday from a guy like from a place like Carolina, like per expectations, he can be a little bit more of a success. I want that for him.
Yeah, that's the trap I was kind of talking about with Diggs. It's, it depends on what you're signing him to be. And I think that applies with Josh Sweat just as much. You got to be careful what your intentions are behind signing a guy that is coming off a super high, but historically speaking, is probably more of an average impact player than anything else. So I think like a team like you said, Carolina, if he goes to Carolina and they're like, or Atlanta, another team that we talk about constantly needing some pass rush help, like I don't see that being much different than them signing Judon from, this last offseason. Like it's not going to move the needle.
No, it's not. And he was almost like the edge rusher class, like you were saying, it really wasn't that interesting. The other two guys that I kind of looked at for briefly, and not to get into them too much, but like Chase Young, where like you see like there was potential at some point, but I don't know if you see any potential in Chase Young. At this point, I do not. And then another guy that's kind of weird is Hassan Reddick, who is like 2 years removed from being a monster and is now seen as like a bum. So a guy like Josh Sweat probably could make a lot more money than it'll seem smart to be doing.
Yeah, Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, like, do you want the head case with the high upside, or do you want the guy that might give you like a 2 or 3 sack performance here and there, but is just usually mid? Like, what do you want?
Yeah. Well, like we're also in a rare case where like we do have an elite player from this last season entering free agency from the same team. We see a guy like Zack Baun, who was kind of a nobody on the Saints for a while. Like he was getting like 25 to 30 tackles a game. And then this last season put up a first-team All-Pro season out of seemingly nowhere. So I'm curious to know if you think that, like, they'll be able to bring him back. I haven't really looked at their financials very much, but, like, do you think that they're going to really try and bring him back? Or do you think a team is going to see the first-team All-Pro and just send the house at him money-wise?
Oh, man. This is tough because I think obviously it'll hinge on Philly. He's going to want to stay in Philly. It's the place that made him who he is. So he's going to prioritize that. It will depend on where he's willing to kind of, fall into in terms of how much of a pay cut he'll be willing to take, I guess, to stay in Philly, and how much Philly has faith in developing their room of linebackers. Like if I'm Philadelphia and I took Oren Burks and I took Zack Baun and made them into serviceable plus all-pro guys, like, if Zack Baun's going to stand at the top of the money mountain and not come down, like, you know what, I'll go draft somebody and be like, I'll replace you and do what we did with you anyway. Like that's how I would think about it if Zack Baun is going to be stingy about it. So I feel like this would apply for any team that just won a Super Bowl in my mind, which I guess is kind of unfair, but anybody coming from a team that just won and everyone did well, I would be weary of paying them at that expectation. And Zack Baun, similar to Mekhi Becton, is that story. Like careful what you're paying him
yes.
for, because you're not going to get it. You're likely not going to get that production.
Yeah. I mean, a converted off-ball, like he is an off-ball linebacker now, but he was an edge rusher / like hybrid outside linebacker forever. So I think that he can just walk into any system and just be their starting Mike linebacker is a little ambitious. I think a lot of that still does play to their system that they just played in, that helped guys like Oren Burks become a player that we haven't seen him be in a while. And I'm not insanely confident that like he could walk into like Tampa Bay, say Levante David retires. Like I don't think that he can just walk into Tampa Bay and get 150 tackles, be like PFF's #1 rated linebacker again. Like I don't know if I can see that happening.
Yeah,
which is
I agree.
Hard because he's going to get paid like he is, I believe.
You think so? You think he's going to fetch that kind of money from Philly or no?
No. I mean, I don't think Philly can. Like I know they still have a little bit of cap space, shockingly, but like they're gonna. I mean, if they don't bring back Milton Williams, if they don't bring back Josh Sweat, if they don't bring back anybody, if they don't bring back Becton, maybe. Like if they just let everybody walk and bring back Baun, then probably. But if they want to try and at least like bring back a few of the people that they just had on that Super Bowl team, I don't think that they could pay Zack Baun like top 5 linebacker money, which I feel like he's probably going to pull. Which is going to be, I mean, Tremaine Edmonds just made that much like insane money like a few years ago. Zack Baun's better than him at least.
That's true. I forgot how much money Tremaine Edmonds got. My God, even TJ Edwards, like both of those guys got bags. Like, oh wow, that's a good point. Like those guys, maybe the Bears were just overly desperate, but holy shit, you are not wrong about that.
Like, and it's a completely different. They asked him to play in a different system, like a different scheme completely from what Tremaine Edmonds is used to doing. And they're just like, okay, well, we get this like really big young linebacker. Zack Baun's still probably like 27, 28. Like he's not old. So I don't know. I feel like a team that needs a middle linebacker is going to be so ambitious with him and pay him top tier money, but we haven't seen him do this outside of this 1 year. So it's a little bit more of a gamble than I think that people are kind of treating it like it is.
100%. Yeah, people will see all pro and just automatically assume this is the standard this guy plays at, but we don't have enough of a sample size to confidently say that. And you would think organizations, executives that do this for a living and get paid to do it would understand that, but who knows? You're right. A team like Chicago will go out and hand him whatever, hand him a blank paycheck.
Here's $20 million. Yeah. Like, because you're big and athletic. Like that's a hard one. And like, I know we tried to steer clear of like the T. Higgins of the world, like the clear number one of their position, but like I haven't heard people really talk about him enough as a free agent. And two, it kind of feels like people are just assuming Philly brings him back. But like we were saying before, like there might just be a random team that offers him like $8 million more than Philly's even able to. Mm-hmm. So that'll be a little bit more interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, that will definitely be a close watch because you're right. I don't think people are talking about him because they are assuming he gets brought back. So it's not always guaranteed.
No, it's not. But to get away from the super big names, I guess, how much Alex Austin have you watched in like anytime recently?
Not much. I can't say I've watched a lot of Alex Austin.
He was insanely good. I went back and I watched a little bit of New England's Alex Austin, who they brought in this past season to be their like perimeter corner too. He was fantastic. I was hoping that you'd seen at least a little bit of Alex Austin to know what I'm talking about this season, because like I feel like if some other team saw the exact same version that I just watched, they would actually like aggressively go after him. And I don't know if it's just like my fan goggles or whatever of being like the world's biggest Alex Austin fan, but like he was killing it.
Yeah, he's young too. I mean, he's not this kid's 24, 20 something like that, 23, 24.
He's like 23 as a free agent, which is insane.
Yeah, and for a defense that took a dramatic like plummet from Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo, like there were not many like bright spots. Like a guy like Josh Uche, for example, everyone was loving him for a brief moment. Then Gerard Mayo stepped in, and that defense just took a nosedive. And all of a sudden, Josh Uche is getting traded for pennies, and then not even playing.
Did nothing.
And now he's
like Kansas City.
Yeah, like now he's nothing. Like for Alex Austin, of all guys, in an environment like that, to still be a bright spot, like. Definitely kudos to him. Like I haven't the name Alex Austin, I don't think has crossed my mind since like I don't know.
I think you've probably at least seen a little bit of Alex Austin. well then I'll bring up a guy you might know a little bit more. Rasul Douglas. Yeah. He's older and he's been on like 1,000 teams. But he's good. He has been a really good corner the last like 2 to 3 seasons. So I'm curious to know like if you still think he's got it. I mean, he's 31, I think. Like does he have a little bit more, or did he decline a little bit this season?
Rasul was excellent for what we needed him to do when Benford was healthy. And when we were playing a lot of too high, Douglas was excellent. When, especially when Benford went down and we were trying to play more man coverage, the dude was one of like the worst man coverage corners. Like I know Kyrie Elam has some pretty bad clips out there, but Douglas got cooked a few times.
Is he worse than Kyrie Elam at that?
No. There's no one worse than Kyrie Elam, unfortunately.
Okay.
But he was not good in man-to-man. So it's got to be, once again, the right place, a team that plays a lot of too high again to help him, because he's just you get old, you're not able to keep up with these young fast receivers in man-to-man coverage. This is naturally what happens. So I think in the right place, he could still be a high-end cornerback 2. He could be a low-end CB1 if you're in a room of just a bunch of good players. Like if he replaced Darius Slay this year, I think you would have done a good job. Like I think that would have been a good fit. Maybe they don't run as much. I know Darius Slay was running with a lot of the better receivers at times. I know Douglas probably wouldn't have been able to do that as much, but they had other guys that probably could have if they were asking them to do that. So yeah, depending on the room, I think Rasul could definitely still be a high-end cornerback 2 for a contending team, especially.
What do you think about Damar Hamlin? Is he a starter in the NFL on another team?
Oh man, probably not. Probably not. I think Damar had his moments. I think Damar needs to play alongside. He needs to play alongside someone that can, like a Justin Simmons. Like he would have to play, I think, alongside someone like that to come into his own. I wish he would have had more time to be with, the Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde tandem. If he was able to really learn from that a lot more, I think he would come into his own. But I don't think he will be back in Buffalo in a starting capacity. He might end up somewhere like, I could see a team like fucking Pittsburgh bringing him in.
Like, he is a Pittsburgh player.
He just seems to fit that type of environment. He'll certainly be somewhere, but starting, no, I don't think Damar Hamlin will be starting this year.
Yeah, he was a guy like everybody was so excited about. Coming back from the dead's a pretty big deal as an NFL player. But like, what I watched when I tuned into Buffalo Bills games was not good quality. I mean, for Taylor Rapp to kind of be your most impressive safety, Taylor Rapp was basically booed out of the Rams. So, like, for him to be your best safety, like, almost comfortably at some points is not a very good sign. And I think that kind of showed with their run defense issues and then eventually some pass defense issues. So I am kind of with you. And unless a team like Carolina can't figure out their safety room yet again, and then they have to settle for a Damar Hamlin, I don't see him being like a starting free safety in the NFL. If a free safety at all, I don't think he's probably more of a strong safety in my opinion. But
that's what I was thinking too. It's like I don't think he's great in coverage. I think most of his better plays, I mean, the highlight of his career was probably getting Lamar in the backfield. Like,
yes, as a downhill player.
Literally. So that's why I'm saying, like, if he was playing with like a Justin Simmons, like he would be I think he'd be able to be more versatile and do things that Buffalo wasn't really giving him as much opportunity to do, because in Buffalo, safeties weren't playing in the box really as much. You have Teron Johnson to do that. So
yeah, he's a beast.
So, but yeah,
the other player I have is also a safety, and the last player that I have is a guy that a lot of people weren't really familiar with until about halfway through the season, and he revived an entire defense. Ardarius Washington, the free safety for the Baltimore Ravens, replaced Marcus Williams somewhere around halfway through the season and turned them from like one of the worst coverage defenses in the entire NFL into actually like a very strong coverage defense, because he wasn't getting burnt every play like Marcus Williams. And he does have his weird limitations. He's like 5'7" on a good day, but he's a monster. Like, he is absolutely flying around the field, and like, I never saw him get beat one time live. Like, he's an absolute animal. So I'm curious to know, like, if you think that Baltimore does everything they can to get that back because they don't want to bring Marcus Williams back out there again, or if another team sees that and kind of values him as a high-end safety in the NFL.
I think to replace a guy like Marcus Peters, I know he's at the end of his rope, but it's a seasoned veteran. Like, this guy has been on a lot of winning teams in winning secondaries. So that's a pretty big accomplishment Ardarius Washington achieved this year. I think Baltimore would be kind of crazy not to try and bring him back as much as they could, because you don't see a guy work in your ecosystem as well as he did and kind of turn, like you said, turn that whole group around. Like Zack Baun, for example, we can talk about him walking all we want, but you can also have confidence that Philadelphia could work someone to replace him. right now in Baltimore, like what do we have to say? Like, what can we point to in Baltimore to say, this guy's coming up through the ranks, and we have confidence that Baltimore can kind of work someone up to replace our Darius Washington. We don't really have that. So I think Baltimore would be insane not to do what they can to bring him back. And I mean, I don't think our Darius is a guy that will demand from I don't think other teams are going to be looking at our Darius Washington and being like, here's this check. I think Baltimore would be able to get him back at a reasonable cost.
I hope not. As a team of the rival defense, it was nice when Baltimore had a bad defense for like half of a season. So here's to another 20 years of Baltimore having a good. I thought we had it, but I guess not.
He literally is short. Like, that guy is short.
He's like he's like a legitimate 5'8", like no taller, not taller at all. It's actually crazy how good he is for being that little.
That's a good one.
But yeah, those are the only guys I really wanted to get into a ton. The only guy I was actually kind of interested in is it's kind of weird, Dan Skipper.
I looked at him.
Did you really?
I did.
Dan Skipper is like a behemoth. He's one of the biggest people in all of football. And he always plays great as like their sixth lineman. But I'm curious if a team like legit can't find an offensive lineman if they bring him in to try and find a role for him. But
that's the kind of guy like I would have more faith in bringing in to hopefully turn something around, because he didn't play a ton in Detroit, obviously because of how good that group already is. But for him to see playing time and enough of it to feel like, okay, we can bring him in. He at minimum is a solid depth option for a team. And that's probably what he gets paid as. So at I think he's 31. Like, lineman can go a couple more years. And Dan Skipper's a guy, I think he plays with a lot of physicality. I mean, the dude's fucking huge. So big. Like, if you're looking for a power run scheme and you need a left tackle that could kind of be, if he's full-time, rotational, competing for it, I think Dan Skipper would be a great option, an underrated option for sure.
Yeah.
Dan Skipper, that's a good one.
I'm the world's biggest Dan Skipper fan ever.
I literally.
Did you have any names? Oh my, yeah. He was a ridiculous one.
All right. Yeah, I do actually have some names that I wanted to bring up to get your thoughts on. Right. So Rasul Douglas was on my list.
Okay.
We talked about Rico Dowdle a little bit already.
Yeah.
A guy that I want to get your thoughts on is Asante Samuel Jr.
I have good thoughts on Asante Samuel Jr.
I didn't know this, but I knew he missed basically all of the season, but he missed a lot of this year with like this shoulder injury that he's dealt with like his whole life. But I guess he like re-aggravated it this year, and then they put him on IR. And everyone was confused. Like, why is he on IR? They thought it was just like a stinger and he left the game and would be back. And then all of a sudden he's on IR. So what do you do? Like, this guy's he could be a home run hitter, but you have this weirdo injury. Like, what do you do? How do you pay Asante Samuel?
I think this is just unfortunate for him. And I don't think he's going to get paid. Like, I think like teams, the entire point of building a team is like risk analysis. Like, how much can you benefit from paying a 5'10" corner in his second contract when he has like a potential career-ending shoulder injury? Like, I have no idea. But like, the player himself is a really good corner.
Yes.
Who kind of has this like slot versatility, but like he can also play outside, and he's crazy aggressive. Like, he will not stand down to any challenge. Like, I love Asante Samuel, and I would love him to be a Bengal. Like, I would love him to be like the next Mike Hilton replacement. And I would be glad to pay him more than Mike Hilton. But like, I mean, if he's going to be getting injured all the time, I have no idea. I think this is just one of those cases where like we look back one day and we're like, how did they get him for so cheap? I think this is one of those things. Like, you kind of just have to, because it's such a risk. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Asante Samuel.
He's a spitfire. That's the I feel like I'll use that word a lot throughout the course of this podcast history, but there are a lot of guys that really fit that word so well, and he's one of them. Like, you're right, he will not back down to any challenge. He's all bark and all bite. Like, he will bring it. Like, he talks and he'll bring it. So
yeah, I mean, like, it's a lot harder these days with how good passing offenses are to find a good, like, a guy that for a fact will be a good starting corner and has like positional alignment versatility. Like, how often can you find a guy that can like run the slot at a high level, can play a nickel, can play outside, and just kind of be like a chess piece for like a good defensive coordinator? It's not that common. I mean, like I would pay a pretty penny to have that on my team, especially because he's probably like in his mid-20s. So yeah, I'm definitely in for really any reasonable corner price.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're probably right. He probably won't get paid, but if there's a risk to take in this free agency market and you're a general manager and you're like, shit, man, this is my last year. Like, I need to make sure this is a good year. This is a swing I'd be willing to take, I think.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's not coming back because I'm pretty sure they just extended Elijah Molden, like pretty good money, who kind of played like a similar kind of nickel role for them. So unless they bring Asante Samuel back to play outside corner, which I don't think they will, with like Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, like it sounds like he's on a different team this season. So let's bring him to Cincinnati. For the love of God, please. I'm excited for him. Welcome. Welcome to Cincinnati. Like that's I need it.
There were a couple. I don't know why I ended up going with as many corners as I did. Corners and a couple linebackers are pretty much what I got. I don't know why. I just gravitated toward them. Another name was Iffy Melifonwu. Another guy that missed some of this year, but I loved him coming out of the draft. Like I wanted Buffalo to draft Melifonwu so fucking bad. I don't even remember what happened. I think we either passed on him or I think he ended up going like the third round, actually, if I remember correctly. But anyway, toolsy defensive back, very toolsy. He can play. I mean, he played really everywhere in the secondary for Detroit. He ended up being the most impactful for Aaron Glenn when he was rushing the quarterback, actually. But he played safety. He played in the slot. He was rushing the quarterback. Like this guy can do a lot. And I was looking to get your thoughts on Iffy Melifonwu.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you find like a DB with like crazy length, but like that doesn't play the perimeter really? Like he's kind of just this like over the middle of the field, kind of like every player we've ever seen Dallas have success with ever, like Jaron, like the Jaron Curses of the world. So I'm kind of intrigued to see, like, I don't think that he ever has this like set in stone starting role, like you said, because like he's kind of best like as a blitzer and he's not really best like in actual coverage responsibility. But for a team that has like a creative defensive coordinator that can move these big pieces around, kind of similar to what like you would normally see in Dallas, like I would love him in a role like that where he can just kind of have his like set position, like the Melifonwu position, where he can just be a big blitzer, play in the box, play in the slot as like against tight ends. Like I love him in that kind of situation, but I don't think he's getting paid more than like $10 to $15. like I don't think anybody really like. I don't think there's a market for him at all, especially if he was just coming off an injury. But like, I'm intrigued.
Come on, you do my guy like that. Well, it's funny because I'll talk about Melifonwu and I'll be very positive about how I feel regarding his versatility and where you can plug him in and how you can use him. But then I'll look at a guy like Dyami Brown, and he's another free agent, obviously, and he was a lot more impactful down the stretch for Washington. You know, he made a couple pretty big plays. He had that didn't he have like 100+ yard game in the postseason?
He was like their best offensive weapon, like consistently in the playoffs. Like I looked at his numbers, like he was putting up like 85 yards and a touchdown a game in the playoffs. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and it makes me think because his numbers on the season overall, I think he only had like 300 yards, which
he did. I checked was because I was shocked.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what kind of market does he demand if he's not staying in Washington, or if he is?
I had him in a post of mine, and I was kind of just thinking, like, do teams value him as that playoff performer where he was putting up like 80 to 100 yard games with a touchdown and like almost was dominant at certain points? Or is he a 300 yard receiver that had at one point his role being eaten into by Luke McCaffrey? Like, I don't really even know what Dyami Brown is at this point. Yeah. He's super young and he's athletic. He doesn't really have like a stereotypical like outside perimeter receiver build, and he's not really a slot. So I don't really know what to label him as. But a team like I said before, like a team like Pittsburgh, I think would be really interesting for someone like him that like has been searching for like the second to third option for so long. And I think that they're done getting the like the Ben Skoroneks and like the Allen Robinsons of the world. Like I would rather go for a Dyami Brown than somebody that's like pushing 45 that used to be good. So yeah, I would take a risk, but I don't think I would pay that much.
Yeah, I didn't realize I felt this way, but I think I'm kind of a Dyami Brown hater, and it kind of stems from like Curtis Samuel and how much the Bills paid him this year to be fucking like invisible. Like what I wrote down was the reason why Dyami Brown is viewed as this versatile plug anywhere kind of player is because he's not good at anything specifically to be playing anywhere dominantly. Yeah. So what do you do with a guy like that? And then all of a sudden you have a guy in your offense and your offensive coordinator's like, well, let's try him here and then here. We'll put him here and, try him on screens and then we'll put him in the backfield. Then he can play in the slot or maybe he can, extend the field on the outside. It's like, what the fuck? What is he actually doing? And that's what I was wondering with Curtis for so long. And that's a guy that Curtis specifically, they remind me of each other. And he had, that one good year in like 2020 with the Panthers. I think he had like 800 yards or something. And then he had like a 600-yard year with Washington at some point later on. And I think people saw those flashes, that small upside, and they're like, okay, maybe he could do that for us. And that's what Buffalo fell into. And I think that's what would happen with a Dyami Brown. So I'm kind of against him, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was never big on him in college. I know he always had this like humongous fan base that's been following him around this entire time. And they let me know. But like, yeah, I don't value him as this like super high end second to third option. I think that he is that. I think he's a third option on like a bad passing offense. But yeah, I don't view him as like the wide receiver 2 in Washington at all. I think that he goes somewhere, gets overpaid, and then everyone hates him again. So that's kind of how it's going to go.
That's exactly what I think is going to happen, unfortunately.
Which is how Curtis Samuel worked, unfortunately. Yes. Yeah.
All right. My last two players, and then we'll get out of here. Both are linebackers, and I'm excited to get your thoughts on these guys. The first one being a much bigger name, who I don't feel like people appreciate nearly enough, and that's Robert Spillane.
Ooh.
He was phenomenal. He's been phenomenal for the Raiders these last couple of years. Arguably a top 20 linebacker in football, I think you could say. Might be pushing it, but he was great in every facet of the game. I think Spillane was great. So do the Raiders prioritize bringing him back? I think they'd be crazy not to. Or does someone else go and pay him a pretty penny?
I know he looks super old, but I don't think he actually is. Like, I think that he's like probably mid to late 20s. I'd have to guess.
30. He's 30.
Is he 30 now already? God bless. But either way, like that's not that bad for a linebacker. Especially one that's like one of the only people I've ever seen actually like crush Derrick Henry. Like he is an absolute like hammer. On top of like being probably pretty affordable, even though he played at a high level, he's still one of the better run defending linebackers in the league the last 5 to 10 years. Like, obviously he does have some coverage limitation, but like what they let him do, he does at a pretty high level. He's not like the guy like taking like the Tampa 2 middle. He's not Brian Urlacher. Like he's not flying up the field, but he's a guy that like has a very small amount of responsibility and does it at a high level. And as a run defender, he is their defense. Like him and Max Crosby are their run defense. So I'm a huge fan. I think that he should definitely stay in the team that's kind of let him blossom and be who he is. Have a little bit loyalty there, especially like I like the way that they're trending for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. So I would love him to get like a pretty decent, like loyalty based payday from Tom Brady in Vegas.
Yeah. I remember watching that Henry tackle. Like that was like as much of an in-game Oklahoma drill as you're going to get. And he came downhill one-on-one in the gap. And I don't even know if Henry was not prepared for that kind of game. He got like lit up.
He normally just falls forward, but like when you have somebody else that's like weighs 245 and is meaner than you, like he's probably going to win that like 9.9 times out of 10.
Would you say he in this? I don't know how many of the free agent linebackers you know on offhand, but
a few.
I think he's arguably the best in this class because the top ones are Dre Greenlaw, who is coming off that injury. So who knows what he is even at this point. And then there's Nick Bolton. I think I'm taking Robert Spillane over Nick Bolton.
I view Spillane a little bit higher than Bolton. I think they're both fantastic run defenders. I think Spillane does have a little bit more command of the defense. Like I kind of view him as like the main green dot on my defense. I think Nick Bolton's just kind of like an angry little bull. Zack Baun is always a guy, like after what he proved, I'm going to have to say he's one, but like
fair.
But like you have guys like, Jamie and Sherwood is another guy that I'm super high on, but he's another guy we haven't seen that much of outside of like one really solid year. So a guy that's been doing it for a while, like Spillane, and has proven that like he is a good starting middle linebacker. I'm a huge fan. So I don't know if I go out and say he's the best one of all the free agents, but like he's definitely worth a pretty penny from a team that like Carolina that also didn't really have much of a middle linebacker this year.
I forgot
it's him over Trevin Wallace. Like,
yeah, I forgot.
You say forgot Zack Baun
for a second. So yeah, you're right. Zack Baun definitely is the top guy. But I would pay. You're right. That point about Nick Bolton is very correct. Like you don't look at Nick Bolton as the quarterback of the defense. Like Robert Spillane is that. Like he is that spine, that core for Vegas, and he's been these last couple of years. So he deserves a lot more recognition. And the last niche linebacker I'll touch on is, speaking of good run defenders, Elandon Roberts.
Oh man,
Pittsburgh linebacker. That guy is violent.
He is the worst coverage linebacker in the NFL and the best run defending linebacker in the NFL.
So good at defending the run. It's insane how different he is.
Because I think I remember saying I did a post before the playoffs, and I did like a player to watch for each team. And when they played the Baltimore, I said, watch Elandon Roberts. He hasn't had more than like 4 tackles the last like 5 weeks, but I promise you he'll get so many this. He had like 14 again because he had to play against Derrick Henry.
Yep.
Like they had to bring him in because he was the only man that could contend with Derrick Henry, and had him in check for a little bit. Like he is an absolute beast. He's like maybe 6 foot tall and like 250. Like he is like this like old school thick downhill elite run defender. So if you can sign him to like be a guy that only operates on like short yardage situations, I'd pay him a decent little bit for that. Just never let him ever touch coverage like in his life. But yeah, I'm a bigger Elandon Roberts fan than like PFF would probably say they are.
Oh yeah, because of course they're going to value everything that he's not good at way too much. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he is old school. The guy, I think violent is such a good word for him. He doesn't give a fuck who's in front of him. He'll take him on and he'll push back, like pulling guards, linemen, whoever's in front of him. He's going to smack in the mouth and lay him out. Like he gets to the point of attack, and he makes you feel something.
I feel like I'm having like a weird. Did he used to play fullback for the Patriots at one point? Like I feel like I remember him playing very brief amounts of fullback for New England. And I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but like that's just the kind of player that he is. Like he is the kind of player that like you just bring in and run people over. Like he doesn't have a role other than to just demolish whoever's in front of him.
Mm.
And I love football players like that.
Did he play fullback?
I don't think he was an actual like fullback starter, but I'm pretty sure like he got brought in as like a sub package fullback,
like a sub Sam Hubbard kind of thing.
Yeah, but like did it way more than he did.
Yeah, he did. 2019. Since making his fullback debut in a Week 7 win over the Jets. This is an article from 2019. That's crazy. You just remember that. That's insane.
That was like my first introduction to it. I was like, who is this dude? And then like as his career's gone on, he's gotten a little bit more like actual linebacker responsibility, and he's played pretty good football. So yeah, I'd love to see him get on like a team where he's actually like gets more of a starting role.
Mm-hmm. He actually scored a touchdown, by the way, if you care.
It's incredible.
And
I don't actually remember that. I remember him running somebody over. I don't remember that.
It was a receiving touchdown, and it was like 40 yards. Like
what?
He caught a ball in the flat and made one guy miss, and he just ran down the sideline. That's crazy.
That's insane. That's actually
Tom Brady.
Ridiculous. Oh, Tom Brady. Wow.
Yep.
He's been doing it for a while now then. Well, there you go. We're paying fullbacks these days. Pay fullback Elandon Roberts. Whatever he wants. Blank check.
All right. I mean, some other boofoo ass names I don't need to touch on. All right. I think we're good to.
I saw AJ Dillon on my list. I was like, nope, not getting into that. No Eddie Pinheiro today.
I have Aaron Banks here. I'm like, nah.
That's like for like the most niche of watchers.
Yeah,
like the most like mediocre guard you've ever seen. Like
literally, I'm like, no, I guess you could probably throw him somewhere, but at this point, is it even worth the conversation? Like
they're all Bengals. Every guard that's better than Alex Kappa is a Bengal. Like that's all you were gonna hear me say.
All right. Well, that will, I think, wrap up episode 13. A nice, fine hour, roughly.
Perfect.
That's something that doesn't really happen here very often. So appreciate it while you have it in episode 13.
Yeah, I kind of like how this went from just like the biggest name free agents getting into like Dan Skipper and freaking like Elandon Roberts. But yeah, that was fun. There's a lot of free agency left even before the tampering period starts. In what, like you said, 17 days?
It's March 10th, so whatever that is. Probably.
I don't do math. Either way, like free agency is coming soon. There's a couple hundreds of players probably thousands of players that we tried to peruse through. So we're going to do our best to try and get to at least a few more. Try and touch on a few teams. Like we're still going to try and do like the whole team rebuild segment. So a lot of offseason work to get into that I'm really looking forward to.
Absolutely. And next, speaking of the rebuilding series, we're kind of kickstarting. You should expect another one this coming week. We have more guests with parentheses as possibly coming for the next week. Maybe we'll see. But anyway, we will dig into free agents more as the tampering period and the window opens. But if you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, comment, share. Be sure you're checking out Against the Blitz. All the socials down in the description. Be sure you're following both of us, our socials in the description as well. And we will see you guys in episode 14.